Thank you so much for joining me once again on the chat on the Plaza. And it's me, Gloria. Today we're going to be focusing on one of the critical aspects of our labor force, that is the informal sector. And we are very honored to be having someone with the expertise on this particular area, and she'll be helping us understand how exactly we can have social protection coverage for this particular segment of the population. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria, for this opportunity to discuss this very important topic. My name is Ssanyu Rebecca. I am a member of the Social Protection Platform Uganda, which is a civil society coalition of members, organizations that are interested in promoting social protection policy and programming in Uganda.
You know, you've done a lot of studies, a lot of research around the informal sector workers. Briefly, how would you describe the informal sector in Uganda?
Well, you would describe the informal sector as those workers that are not necessarily regulated by government. They are mostly own account workers, meaning that they're self-employed or they're business people. Yes, they pay tax, but not from a formal structured kind of. They rarely pay direct taxes. They mostly pay trade taxes and other informal taxes, indirect taxes. Now, these people are across various sectors. Majority of them are in the agriculture sector. We have traders, we have transporters, we have people in the markets, we have people who do, informal business as irregular work, casual workers, all kinds of people. And even where you find businesses or enterprises that have a group of people, they are usually not more than 5. So that is what we would refer as the informal sector in Uganda.
Definitely from that explanation, one would think this particular sector was very vulnerable to COVID-19. I don't know if you share the same view.
Yes, because primarily when the COVID-19 came, then there was a lockdown, and mostly it's their sector that actually went into lockdown. You would be aware, for example, that civil servants continued to earn, people in the NGO sector continued to earn, people with large businesses downsized, but people either had to take home half pay or, they would work schedules, but there would still be some pay. But for the informal sector workers, there was basically nothing. For example, if they had to ride borders or buses, they couldn't because nobody was traveling. So their income is also based on their ability to go out and work every day. So if they are not able to go and work every day, it means for every day that they don't work, they lose income. I'll give an example of people in the salons, the hairdressers specifically. Even when they fall sick, for example, they do not earn on a day when a civil servant would take sick leave, which is paid leave. You see, those are the kinds of situations that COVID brought.
It's very interesting that as a society, we have tended to assume that this sector cannot actually be, we cannot regulate it, we cannot have actual interventions to protect these kinds of people. But from your own experience, what do you think what interventions can be put in place to actually ensure that you protect the workers in this particular segment of the labor force?
Well, first of all, I would like to think that it is quite difficult the way they are to give them a blanket social protection cover, the way we understand social protection. But it is not totally impossible. One of the things that I would imagine, for example, if government wanted to cover them, how is government going to cover market vendors and border riders and bus drivers and farmers all together under one blanket system? So I think that's where the problem is.
Okay.
You imagine farmers. I don't know if you are. I am a farmer. You know, you grow a few matoke and you carry in the boot of your car and you go and sell. You are earning income. You are informal sector. So how is government going to find you and cover you? Okay, so because mostly subsistence farming where a little bit of balance is sold. And then you have, you know, people who pick merchandise from shops and sell it on the streets. How are you going to cover, as government, how are you going to cover hawkers, for example? So it's not necessarily easy, but I think there can be options around it. My view is that government can leverage on the existing structures and associations of these groups. For example, there is the Transporters Association, there is the Border Riders Association. So instead of going out full blast and, you know, demanding regulation, because it has challenges, you would actually work with these associations and try to have as many of the people related to a given subsector register with these associations.
Because there is even already trust in these associations.
Yes. Now, once there is trust, then you begin to ask, what is the role of these associations? So maybe negotiation, you know, labor relations, negotiating taxes and things like that. So then you ask, what can be the added role, the additional role of these associations? For example, if you look at market vendors and they have an association, maybe Kalere Market Vendors Association. What can be provided within that? If we look at the COVID situation where these women were sleeping in the markets, what could have been the role of that association in terms of covering them? So if they collect fees, subscription fees and other fees, savings, why don't we then encourage these associations to say a proportion of this collection becomes social security? Okay? So I'll give an example. I have an aunt who had a circle in her community. And so there were younger women in her circle. And so for them, they would use this money for school fees. So every time the term began, they would go and get a bit of this money for fees. But she didn't have children to send to school. And then she got cancer and she needed treatment and she didn't. So she went to her group and said, can I take out my money and buy medicine for cancer? So that would be a form of health insurance for her. So what, if we look at social protection the way it is, it has health insurance, maybe it has workman's compensation, it has child care for mothers, all those kinds of things. How can components of those be included in the role and mandate of associations? Going from that, then you would encourage now these associations to affiliate, for example, to the National Social Security Fund. And this is a model that has worked in countries like Ghana, where they have informal sector workers associations growing their funds into large insurance, funds, and then affiliating this to the Ghana Social Security Fund. And so they are regulated from that aspect, and their members are assured of a benefit at retirement or whatever other benefits that are agreeable. Of course, this might need to be, the benefits might need to be discussed and agreed with individual associations. But this can be one form. Instead of, for example, insisting or requiring that individuals subscribe to NSSF, you might actually want to say, we go to the associations and see how can these associations affiliate to the Social Security Fund, and therefore their fund becomes secure because NSSF is a secure agency, and then NSSF grows its membership.
But there's been the issue of the regularity of how regular incomes are for people in the informal sector. So how do you actually, at that point where this person is not earning, do you come up with a way where someone can access their money? things like midterm access that has been the biggest talk for NSSF, where people cannot access their money. For the informal sector, how do you deal with that? Because these people's incomes are not regular. How do you deal with that?
Well, I would like to say that one of the things we need to understand is the difference between social security as social protection and savings, which you can use as and when the need arises.
Yeah.
I think here, when we talk of social security in this case, we are thinking retirement benefits.
Yes.
Okay? Because this whole thing of midterm benefits, yes, it might be good, but what are the pros and cons? Okay?
So it beats the whole objective.
It might be the whole objective, but also, as you see, the NSSF, for example, it has some benefits that are not the final retirement benefit. So this can be structured in. There have been also debates, for example, around can we use our money as collateral in the bank? So what if you default on the loan and the bank takes all your savings? So I think the decision makers within NSSF are between a rock and a hard place. How do we provide retirement benefits for the members, at the same time be able to fulfill the midterm demand? But going back to the informal sector, they can arrange. It doesn't have to be a blanket cover. It doesn't have to be uniform across sectors. For example, in Tanzania, they have social protection for farmers that is structured a little bit similar to what I just described for Ghana. And so these farmers, they know that their income is seasonal even, it's not regular. And then there are other insecurities around weather, weather-related shocks and all that. So they would define social protection for them as farmers. What would they want? They would want maybe crop insurance, maybe price, they don't want fluctuations in price. How do you ensure that farmers are not affected by price fluctuations? So they design with experts within their field. They would design a social protection arrangement that suits them, and then they contribute, savings towards a social security, and then they link. Once it's grown, it can be linked to NSSF. So NSSF can actually have all these tentacles. It can have for formal sector, because now they are talking about, they are considering making the civil service pension contributory, and then eventually making NSSF into a pension scheme. All those are new things. So how you bring all that together and how you bring all the other people together is very important. You had asked about, for example, regulation. One of the discussions we've had with informal sector actors in Uganda is the whole worry about regulation. When government says regulation, the informal sector hears additional taxation. Okay?
Pull back.
Additional taxation. And taxation is a hindrance. It is a setback. It is a deterrent to informal sector workers. And in fact, this whole concept of social security, for them, they view it as
a tax.
Tax. You're taking away money from us, and we are not going to see it anytime soon.
But is that an issue of lack of proper understanding of what exactly this money is meant for, or what social protection is all about? Exactly.
The whole concept of social protection and the discourse around that, and what social protection means. Because many times when we talk about social protection, the easy one to describe or to discuss is social security contributory. But then there are other aspects, for example, like the senior citizens grant, which is a pension, and people didn't have to contribute to that. But going forward, if governments are going to sustain social protection programming and interventions, we will have to consider more the contributory aspects. Because at the end of the day, it is your money, but government adds to it. The interest is not your money. It's something that comes from government. So I think education, awareness creation are still going to be very important for the informal sector. There have been proposals, for example, by the Mazima Retirement Initiative, where people are encouraged to save on their own volition. But I know that they have got some members, but it is very difficult to sustain the members. You keep encouraging them. You know, when they don't have money, of course, they don't pay. But also, the ease with which people now want to go back and say, can I have a bit of that money? So we think it is money to get at any time. But I think we need to teach people that social protection, social security is for the longer term. It is intended to cover you when you can no longer work, when you are too old, health benefits when you're sick, things like that. And then, of course, there are aspects of health insurance. There are some examples that are with our informal sector, for example, the community-based health insurance initiatives that are happening in Uganda. Usually, they are run by non-government organizations. They are akin to what you see maybe AAR would provide to formal sector workers, but they work at community level and the arrangements are made with local health centers. For example, if you would have market women come together in a group and collect this money and have an agreement, for example, with Chitovu Hospital or other missionary hospitals in the area where they work, so that when they fall sick, they are treated free of cost up to a certain amount. There are those initiatives that government can build and can learn from. Still, it would be very helpful for such initiatives to grow slowly but with a lot of trust. Trust is key in social protection, because even formal sector workers don't really trust NSSF. So if formal sector workers sometimes don't trust NSSF, how can informal sector workers trust an entity with their money when they have never done it, when they don't know, when they don't understand the concept of saving for retirement? It is not very easy, but it is possible. I think one of the things that we really have to do is to raise awareness of this issue.
And maybe lastly, we'll be looking at there's been that aspect of voluntary saving for NSSF. I don't know how that can feed into the informal sector. I don't know, what ideas would you have? Because then I think asking voluntary saving and how sustainable or how feasible is that, especially for the informal sector workers?
Actually, it was intended to attract the informal sector because they are the ones that are not saving. And then there are people who fall out of the formal sector and as are members of the NSSF, so they can contribute voluntarily. Now, the way it is running currently, if we don't look at the amendments to the law, is that you would have been a member earlier. So it means you have fallen out of the formal sector and you already have membership. So it in its form now, it doesn't sort of attract people who are not members.
Or new entrants.
Yeah, new entrants, because now that would require amendments to the law. I know that the proposed amendments would take care of that, but the primary intention is to attract people in the informal sector who are individual workers, who maybe have small companies that have less than 5 people and all that.
Okay, thank you so much, Becky, for coming through, and it's always great to have discussions with people like you that actually appreciate and understand where we are at and where we are going. Thank you so much for joining me on the chat on the Plaza, and hope to see you next time.